What if I told you 4 Scots nobody knew existed fired the creative genius who made them legends? A bathroom confession from Axl Rose revealed their hidden influence. A producer who walked away from creating Appetite for Destruction out of loyalty, then got fired anyway. A drummer dead at 51 on stage, and a voice that conquered the world, silenced by the very lifestyle that forged it. 20 million albums sold, but Turmoil devoured everything. This is the rise and fall of Nazareth. Dunfermline, Fife, Scotland, December 1968. If you wanted to make it in rock and roll, this was the last place anyone would look. No record labels, no industry connections, just cold industrial wind sweeping through working-class streets where dreams seemed as distant as the London stages they read about in music magazines. But 4 men didn't care about the odds. Vocalist Dan McCafferty, guitarist Manny Charlton, bassist Pete Agnew, and drummer Daryl Sweet emerged from the remnants of a semi-professional local group called the Shadettes, which had been grinding through Scottish clubs since 1961. They weren't assembled by some producer looking for the next big thing. They were brothers, bound not just by music, but by genuine friendship and shared struggle. The depth of that bond ran deeper than most people realize. Pete Agnew and Dan McCafferty weren't just bandmates. They were childhood friends who had known each other since they were 5 years old. That loyalty would define everything they would build together for the next 4 decades. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. As Agnew himself would later reflect, they progressed from a wedding group into one of the most underrated and stubbornly persistent hard rock bands that these isles ever produced. That persistence wasn't born from ego or ambition alone. It was forged in the blue-collar reality of Dunfermline, where you either worked hard or you didn't eat. They needed a name, something that captured their spirit without taking themselves too seriously. The answer came from an unlikely source, the band's classic American roots rock song, The Wait. I pulled into Nazareth, was feeling about half past dead. The choice was revealing. They weren't referencing the biblical town. They were paying homage to Nazareth, Pennsylvania. Their musical DNA was already pointing westward, toward the American icons who had shaped them. They understood instinctively that their future wasn't in the UK club circuit. It was across the Atlantic, where FM radio was exploding and audiences were hungry for raw, honest hard rock. In 1970, they made the leap. They packed their gear and moved to London, diving headfirst into the most competitive rock scene on the planet. Their self-titled debut album, Nazareth, was released in November 1971, but the album barely made a ripple. Their follow-up, Exercises in 1972, garnered some attention, but they were still grinding, still struggling, still invisible to the masses. What they needed was a break. What they needed was validation from someone who mattered. And in 1972, that validation arrived in the form of British hard rock royalty. After the release of Exercises, Nazareth secured something that would alter their trajectory forever. A support slot on a Deep Purple tour. For a band still fighting for recognition, opening for one of the biggest hard rock acts on the planet was the opportunity of a lifetime. But it wasn't just about the exposure. Deep Purple's bassist, Roger Glover, watched them night after night and saw something that the industry had missed. He recognized their raw power, their authenticity, their potential to be more than just another bar band grinding through covers. Glover made them an offer. He would produce their next album. That decision changed everything. Under Glover's expert guidance, Nazareth recorded Razamanes in early 1973. Glover didn't try to polish away their rough edges. He sharpened them. He pushed them toward more aggressive, riff-driven material that aligned perfectly with the emerging early 70s hard rock market. The result was a sound that hit harder, felt heavier, and demanded attention. The commercial impact was immediate and undeniable. Broken Down Angel peaked at number 9 on the UK singles chart. Bad Bad Boy reached number 10. After years of grinding anonymity, Nazareth had finally broken through. They were no longer the unknown Scottish band. They were chart-topping hard rock contenders. Glover himself was stunned by the success. He later recalled, "I came back from the Japanese tour, a broken man, to find that one of my outside productions was very high in the charts, and that was Nazareth. I stepped into another career and suddenly became a well-known producer." The partnership continued through 2 more albums. Loud and Proud in late 1973 featured another crucial hit, their cover of Joni Mitchell's This Flight Tonight. The choice revealed something important about their creative instincts. They weren't just heavy rockers. They understood the power of dynamic range, of pairing crushing riffs with emotionally vulnerable ballads. This combination, heavy originals and strategically chosen covers, would become the blueprint for their greatest triumph. But what truly set them apart was Dan McCafferty's voice. It was a voice forged in Scottish working-class bars, rough and real and utterly authentic. When Dan sang, you believed every word. You felt the pain, the joy, the defiance. Roger Glover had unlocked something in them. He'd given them confidence, commercial validation, and a sound that could compete on the global stage. But they were about to discover that their true potential lay not in following someone else's vision, but in trusting their own. 1975, the moment that would define them forever. After 3 successful albums with Roger Glover, the band made a pivotal decision. They promoted lead guitarist Manny Charlton to the producer's chair. This wasn't just a personnel change, it was a declaration of independence. They were ready to take control of their own destiny. The result was Hair of the Dog, their 6th studio album and their highest-selling release, over 2 million copies worldwide. The title track became one of the most recognizable anthems in hard rock history. That aggressive riff, that defiant attitude, it was pure, uncompromising Nazareth. Dan McCafferty later revealed the story behind the song. It was about a dishonest young woman getting her comeuppance, and the original chorus was even more explicit. The record label, worried about censorship, forced them to use the slightly veiled title, Hair of the Dog. But everyone knew what they meant. That rebellious energy, that refusal to be sanitized. It was everything their audience loved about hard rock in the mid-70s. But here's where Manny Charlton revealed his true genius. For the US and Canadian pressings of the album, he made a calculated swap. He removed the track Guilty and replaced it with a cover of Love Hurts, the 1960 Everly Brothers ballad written by Boudleaux Bryant. On the surface, it seemed like a strange choice. Love Hurts wasn't a typical Nazareth song. It was vulnerable, emotional, achingly beautiful, but Charlton understood something that others didn't. To achieve true crossover appeal, you needed contrast. You needed to show that your band could deliver crushing hard rock anthems and heartbreaking ballads with equal power. When Dan McCafferty sang Love Hurts, his gritty, road-worn voice carried an emotional weight that transformed the song into something entirely new. This was a man who had lived hard, toured relentlessly, sacrificed everything for rock and roll. When he sang about love tearing you apart, you believed him. You felt it in your chest. The strategy worked beyond anyone's wildest expectations. Love Hurts peaked at number 8 on the US Billboard Hot 100. In Canada, it hit number 1. It also topped the charts in Norway, South Africa, and the Netherlands. Suddenly, Nazareth wasn't just a hard rock band. They were a global phenomenon, dominating both FM rock radio and mainstream pop stations. Manny Charlton's gamble, pairing the heavy anthem Hair of the Dog with the vulnerable ballad Love Hurts, demonstrated an astute understanding of how to achieve true multi-format success. It guaranteed them access to audiences who would never have discovered them through hard rock alone. The years of relentless touring, the hard living they'd sung about in their 1972 track, Hard Living Every Day of My Life, had finally paid off. They were arena rock kings, selling out shows from Glasgow to Los Angeles, their music blasting from car radios and jukeboxes across the world. But success at that level comes with a price, and the pressure of maintaining it was about to tear them apart. Following the massive success of Hair of the Dog, Nazareth faced an impossible challenge. How do you follow perfection? Manny Charlton remained in the producer's chair for several subsequent albums, including No Mean City, but the rock landscape was changing beneath their feet. The late 70s and early 80s brought new sounds, glam metal, synth-heavy pop rock, the polished production values of the MTV era. Despite their efforts, they couldn't replicate the multi-format crossover success of Hair of the Dog. Chart positions softened, radio play declined. The music industry was moving on, and Nazareth was being left behind. Charlton himself later reflected on this painful reality, noting that the successes of the 70s didn't repeat in the 80s due to the difference between rock's classic era and the emerging digital day and brand name age. But here's the hidden story that should fill every Nazareth fan with pride. While their commercial profile was shrinking, their influence on the next generation of rock musicians was growing exponentially. In 1988, a young Axl Rose of Guns N' Roses made a confession that validated everything Nazareth had built. "If it wasn't for Dan McCafferty and Nazareth, I wouldn't be singing. I used to lock myself in the bathroom and try to hit those notes in Love Hurts." The connection deepened dramatically when Guns N' Roses began searching for a producer for their breakthrough album. Axl Rose wanted the guy who produced Nazareth's Hair of the Dog, Manny Charlton, to helm what would become Appetite for Destruction. Charlton initially agreed. He attempted the sessions, but ultimately he made a choice that reveals everything about his character and his priorities. He walked away from the project because of his ongoing duties with Nazareth. Was it the right decision? Commercially, probably not, but it speaks to the depth of commitment that defined Nazareth from the very beginning. The same loyalty that had bound Pete Agnew and Dan McCafferty together since they were 5 years old. Guns N' Roses later covered Hair of the Dog on their 1993 album, The Spaghetti Incident, cementing Nazareth's influence on the biggest hard rock band of their generation. But validation from other musicians doesn't pay the bills. And as the 80s wore on, the commercial pressure mounted. The band that had once sold out arenas was now playing smaller venues, watching their record sales decline, wondering if they'd ever recapture the magic of 1975. The pressure was building, the creative disagreements were intensifying, and the bond that had held them together for over 2 decades was about to shatter. After 22 years together, the unthinkable happened. Manny Charlton, founding guitarist, primary songwriter, the producer who had crafted their greatest success, was fired. The split was brutal. Drummer Daryl Sweet confirmed that musical and personal differences had created an impasse. He stated that, "The three of us decided to stick together, and Manny was asked to leave." Sweet tried to justify the decision by citing the commercial reality they were facing. Manny, being one of the main songwriters, had a lot to say about the songwriting. "However, we haven't had a hit record for 6 years. This reveals the cruel logic of the music industry. When success disappears, bands turn on each other. They look for someone to blame. And Charlton, the creative architect of their greatest triumphs, became the scapegoat for their inability to chart in a changing music market. Charlton left with plans to retire, a plan that never really happened. He relocated temporarily to Spain and later to Texas, where he began recording as a solo artist, continuing to demonstrate his unique blend of originals and carefully chosen covers. But the wounds ran deep. The brotherhood was broken, and the consequences would prove even more tragic than anyone imagined. April 30th, 1999, Nazareth was preparing to begin the second leg of their US tour, supporting their album, Boogaloo. It was supposed to be another routine show, another night on the endless road they'd been traveling for 3 decades. Then Daryl Sweet suffered a heart attack. He was 51 years old. The drummer who had been there from the very beginning, who had powered every song from Razamanas to Hair of the Dog, was gone. Just like that. On the road, doing what he'd always done. The sudden visceral loss brought the era of the classic 4-man lineup to a devastating end. It was a harsh reminder of the physical cost of the relentless rock and roll touring life. The hard living they'd sung about back in 1972 had finally come to collect its debt. But the 2 remaining founding members, Dan McCafferty and Pete Agnew, those childhood friends, they persevered. They continued touring, often incorporating Agnew's son, Lee, on drums. Yet the physical demands of 4 decades on the road were catching up. On August 29, 2013, Dan McCafferty was forced to make a heartbreaking announcement. He was retiring from touring due to severe health issues. The press initially reported he'd suffered a stroke, but Dan clarified the truth. He was suffering from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD. His lungs were failing, breathing had become agonizing. During a show in Switzerland, he had been forced to leave the stage mid-performance because he simply couldn't continue. The voice that had conquered arenas, that had influenced Axl Rose, that had delivered the definitive version of "Love Hurts." That voice was being silenced not by age or choice, but by the very lifestyle that had made it legendary. He maintained his dedication to the studio, recording lead vocals for the band's 23rd studio album, Rock and Roll Telephone, released in 2014. His iconic voice was captured one last time, but the days of commanding a stage, of hitting those impossible notes that Axl Rose had once locked himself in bathrooms trying to replicate, those days were over. Dan McCafferty died on November 8, 2022, at the age of 76. The voice was gone, but the legacy, the songs, the influence, the memories of packed arenas and FM radio dominance, that would live forever. Today, Pete Agnew remains the sole continuous original member, continuing the Nazareth name. He's the last man standing, carrying forward a legacy that spans over 5 decades. But let's be honest about what was lost. Manny Charlton, the creative architect, the producer, the strategic genius who understood that Hair of the Dog needed Love Hurts to achieve immortality, fired after 22 years and exiled from the band he'd helped build. Daryl Sweet, the relentless drummer, dead at 51 from a heart attack on the road, his body giving out in the middle of another American tour. Dan McCafferty, the voice that defined them, silenced by COPD, the hard living of the 70s catching up with brutal finality. The classic lineup is gone. The creative core that recorded Hair of the Dog and dominated the charts in 1975 exists now only in recordings and memories. But here's what they left behind. 20 million albums sold worldwide. Love Hurts is one of the most enduring ballads in rock history. Hair of the Dog, as an anthem that still echoes through sports arenas and classic rock radio. The hidden influence on Guns N' Roses and countless other hard rock bands who grew up worshiping Dan McCafferty's voice and Manny Charlton's production. Nazareth proved that 4 working-class kids from Scotland, in a town nobody had heard of, could conquer the world through nothing but authenticity, persistence, and strategic creative brilliance. They also proved that success at that level comes with a price that can never be fully calculated. Friendships destroyed, bodies broken, voices silenced. What matters is that they gave us something timeless, something that still moves us, still connects us to who we were and who we wanted to be. Nazareth's story is the story of rock and roll itself, beautiful, brutal, and ultimately mortal. But the songs are immortal. Nazareth proved that authenticity and strategic brilliance can conquer the world, but turmoil can tear even the strongest bonds apart. 4 childhood friends became legends, then watched their brotherhood crumble under the weight of commercial pressure and physical decline. Yet their music endures, a testament to what they achieved before the fractures appeared. What's your personal memory of Nazareth? Was it Love Hurts on a late-night drive? Or Hair of the Dog shaking your speakers? Drop it in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold stories from rock's greatest era.